The billionaire's hands trembled as he opened the ornate music box. The haunting melody filled his penthouse office, but it wasn't the music that made Alexander Morgan, one of the richest men in the world, collapse into his chair with tears streaming down his face. Inside was something he never expected to see again, something that shattered the emotional walls he'd built over decades. If you've ever wondered whether fate has a way of bringing lost souls together, this story will touch your heart. Before we continue this incredible journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us what truly matters in life. 3 days earlier, Emma and Ethan Walker huddled together under the thin blanket that served as their only protection against the December chill. At 12 years old, the twins had already endured more hardship than most face in a lifetime. 6 months had passed since the apartment fire that took their mother, their only remaining parent after their father's death years before. With no close relatives and a system that had failed them, they'd slipped through the cracks, surviving on the streets of Manhattan through wit, courage, and their unbreakable bond. "We need to try something else," Ethan whispered, his breath visible in the frigid air of the abandoned building they'd claimed as shelter. "The temperature's dropping, and we can't keep sleeping here." Emma nodded, her golden hair, once bright and shiny like her brother's, now dull and matted. Her fingers unconsciously went to the pocket of her worn jacket, where their most precious possession rested. The antique music box was the last thing they had from their mother. Small enough to carry but ornately carved with delicate inlays of mother-of-pearl, it had been passed down through generations. Their mother had told them it was valuable, but more importantly, it held memories that money couldn't buy. "I think it's time," Emma said softly, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom would understand. She always said survival comes first." Ethan's face contorted with pain. "But it's the last thing we have from her." "We have our memories," Emma replied, suddenly seeming older than her years. "And we have each other. That's what Mom would say matters most." The next morning, they made their way to the upscale part of the city, where luxury shops lined the streets and people carried shopping bags from designers whose names the twins couldn't pronounce. They had researched antique dealers online during their occasional visits to the public library, making a list of those most likely to offer a fair price. After being turned away from 3 shops whose owners looked suspiciously at the ragged children, they found themselves standing before Chen's Antiques, a small but elegant store wedged between a high-end jeweler and a gourmet chocolate shop. A bell jingled cheerfully as they entered, the warm air inside a stark contrast to the bitter cold they'd endured. Mrs. Chen, a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a neat bun, looked up from behind the counter. Unlike the previous shop owners, her expression held curiosity rather than judgment. "May I help you?" she asked gently. Emma stepped forward, clutching the box to her chest. "We have something to sell, ma'am. It's very old and special." Mrs. Chen gestured for them to approach. "Let me see, dear." With trembling hands, Emma placed the music box on the counter. It was small enough to fit in both her hands, carved from a rich, dark wood that still gleamed despite its age. The top featured an intricate design of intertwined roses, and when Mrs. Chen carefully opened it, a sweet melody filled the shop. The old woman's eyes widened. "This is extraordinary craftsmanship. French, late 19th century, if I'm not mistaken." She examined it closely, her fingers tracing the delicate woodwork. "May I ask how you came to possess such an item?" "It was our mother's," Ethan said, his voice catching. "And our grandmother's before that." Mrs. Chen looked at them with new understanding in her eyes. She didn't ask why they were selling a family heirloom, the state of their clothes and the hunger in their eyes told her enough. "I can offer you a fair price," she began, but was interrupted by the shop door opening. Alexander Morgan walked in, his imposing presence filling the small space. At 45, he was at the height of his power, the founder and CEO of Morgan Technologies, with a net worth that made him one of the 50 richest people in the world. His tailored suit and commanding demeanor contrasted sharply with the twins' worn clothes and fragile frames. "Ah, Mr. Morgan," Mrs. Chen greeted him with a smile. "Right on time. Your pocket watch is ready." Alexander nodded curtly, his attention momentarily caught by the music box on the counter. Something flickered in his steel-gray eyes, a recognition or memory, there and gone so quickly that no one noticed. "Is that piece for sale?" he asked, his deep voice filling the small shop. Mrs. Chen hesitated, looking at the twins. "These young people were just about to sell it to me." Alexander turned his gaze to Emma and Ethan, taking in their appearance with a quick, assessing glance. Most people looked through them, as if their poverty made them invisible, but Alexander saw them with uncomfortable clarity. "How much were you offering?" he asked Mrs. Chen. "I hadn't named a price yet, but I was thinking around $2,000. It's quite valuable." Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. Without hesitation, he said, "I'll pay $10,000. The twins gasped in unison, and even Mrs. Chen looked shocked. "Sir, that's very generous, but," she began. "I know what it's worth," Alexander interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. He turned to the twins. "Do we have a deal?" Emma and Ethan looked at each other, having a silent conversation as only twins can. $10,000 would change everything for them: shelter, food, clean clothes, maybe even school again. "Yes," Emma finally said. "But, may I open it one last time?" Something in her voice must have reached past Alexander's businesslike exterior, because he nodded without hesitation. Emma carefully lifted the lid, and the melody filled the shop again. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as the familiar notes washed over her. When the song ended, she gently closed the lid and handed the box to Alexander. "Thank you for giving it a good home," she whispered. Alexander's face remained impassive as he took the box, but something stirred behind his eyes, something old and painful that he quickly suppressed. He handed Mrs. Chen his credit card. "Process the payment to cash, please. And I'll take the pocket watch as well." 10 minutes later, the twins stood outside the shop, a thick envelope containing more money than they'd ever seen clutched tightly in Ethan's hands. They watched through the window as Alexander Morgan placed their mother's music box in his briefcase and strode out, barely glancing at them as he entered his waiting town car. "Did we do the right thing?" Emma asked, watching the black car disappear into traffic. "We did what we had to do," Ethan replied, squeezing her hand. "Come on. Let's find somewhere warm to sleep tonight." Alexander Morgan sat in the back of his car, trying to focus on the quarterly reports displayed on his tablet. But his mind kept drifting to the music box now nestled in his briefcase. There was something familiar about it, something that tugged at memories he'd buried long ago. His penthouse was silent and immaculate when he arrived home that evening, exactly as he preferred it. The cleaning service had come and gone, leaving no trace of human presence. Alexander poured himself a glass of scotch and sat at his desk, finally allowing himself to examine the music box properly. It was exquisitely made, the wood smooth under his fingertips. He opened it, and the melody filled his silent home. The same strange recognition washed over him. He knew this song, but couldn't place from where. Inside the lid was a small inscription in faded gold: "To my beloved Eliza, may this melody always bring you home." Alexander frowned. His mother's name had been Eliza. But that had to be a coincidence. Eliza was a common name. Still, something compelled him to examine the box more carefully. His fingers pressed against the wooden panels inside, feeling for anything unusual. One panel seemed slightly looser than the others. Carefully, he pried at it with his fingernail. The panel slid back, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a folded, yellowed photograph and a small folded paper. With hands that suddenly trembled, Alexander removed the photograph and unfolded it. The image showed a young couple with a baby. The woman was beautiful, with a warm smile and light hair. The man beside her looked proud and happy, his arm around her shoulders. And the baby? Alexander's breath caught in his throat. He knew that baby. He'd seen that exact photograph before, in his childhood home, before everything fell apart. The couple in the photograph were his parents. And the baby was him. Alexander fumbled for the folded paper, opening it with shaking fingers. The handwriting was his mother's, unmistakable even after all these years. My darling Alexander, if you're reading this, then you found your way back to the music box. I don't know what path your life has taken, but I hope it led you to joy. Know that you were loved beyond measure. The melody of this box is the lullaby I sang to you every night. May it remind you that no matter where life takes you, love is the true inheritance I leave you. Always, Mother. The glass of scotch slipped from Alexander's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor as he doubled over. Tears he hadn't shed in 30 years flooded his eyes as memories crashed through the walls he'd built around his heart. His mother had died when he was 5. His father, devastated by grief, had become distant and eventually sent Alexander to boarding school. The music box had disappeared during one of their many moves, along with most of his mother's possessions. His father had remarried, started a new family, and Alexander had been left with nothing but determination to succeed where his father had failed him, by becoming so successful, so wealthy, that he would never need anyone again. And now, through some miracle or twist of fate, his mother's music box had found its way back to him, carried by 2 children who reminded him too much of himself at that age, alone and fighting to survive. The twins. With a start, Alexander realized he didn't even know their names. But he knew their faces, and he knew they were out there somewhere in the cold night, trying to make $10,000 stretch as far as possible in one of the world's most expensive cities. Without conscious thought, Alexander picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. Jenkins, I need you to find 2 children for me. Twins, around 12 years old, homeless. They were at Chen's Antiques in Greenwich Village this afternoon around 3. Blonde, thin, boy and girl. Find them tonight. Use whatever resources you need. 3 hours later, Alexander's security team located Emma and Ethan at a budget hotel near Times Square. They had used some of their money to secure a room for a week, planning to make the rest last as long as possible while they figured out their next steps. When Alexander's town car pulled up outside the hotel, he sat motionless for several minutes, the music box in his hands. What was he doing here? What could he possibly say to these children? He, who had deliberately avoided emotional attachments for decades, who ran his company with ruthless efficiency and kept even his closest associates at arm's length. But the music box in his hand seemed to whisper to him in his mother's voice. Love is the true inheritance I leave you. Emma and Ethan were understandably suspicious when hotel management informed them a visitor was asking for them. They agreed to meet in the hotel lobby, ready to flee if necessary. When they saw the billionaire from the antique shop striding toward them, their confusion only deepened. You're the twins who sold me the music box, Alexander said without preamble. Emma stepped protectively in front of her brother. Yes, sir. Was there something wrong with it? Alexander shook his head, then surprised them by sitting down in one of the lobby chairs, bringing himself to their eye level. What are your names? He asked, his voice gentler than it had been in the shop. I'm Emma Walker, and this is my brother, Ethan, she replied cautiously. Walker, Alexander repeated, a strange expression crossing his face. Tell me, Emma and Ethan Walker, how did your family come to possess that music box? The twins exchanged glances, unsure why this mattered. It was our mom's, Ethan finally said. She said it came from her grandmother, who got it from her mother. And what was your mother's name before she married? Morgan, Emma answered. Elizabeth Morgan, but everyone called her Beth. Alexander closed his eyes briefly, pieces falling into place. Elizabeth, Eliza, his mother's name had been Elizabeth, too, but family had called her Eliza. The music box must have gone to his father's sister, his Aunt Margaret, after his mother died. Margaret, who had moved away and lost touch with the family. Margaret, who must have passed it down through her line, eventually reaching Beth Walker née Morgan, and finally, these twins. The music box belonged to my mother, Alexander said softly. Your mother and I were distant cousins, it seems. The box was lost to my branch of the family decades ago. The twins stared at him in shock. So we're related? Ethan asked incredulously. Distantly, yes. Family. The word felt strange on Alexander's tongue after so many years of isolation. Emma's eyes narrowed suspiciously. If you're family, where were you when our mom died? Where were you when they tried to separate us in foster care and we ran away instead? The accusation hit Alexander like a physical blow. Where had he been? Building his empire, accumulating wealth that suddenly seemed meaningless in the face of these children's suffering, children who shared his blood, however distant the connection. I didn't know, he said simply. But I know now. And I'd like to help, if you'll let me. What followed was a conversation that lasted until dawn, as Alexander shared the hidden compartment's contents and the twins told him about their mother, their life before the fire, and their struggles since. By morning, something had fundamentally shifted in Alexander's world. The walls he'd built around his heart had crumbled, and in their place was a fierce determination to protect these children who had unknowingly returned to him a piece of his soul. In the months that followed, Alexander's life transformed. He became the twins' legal guardian, bringing them to live in his penthouse that quickly lost its cold perfection and gained the warmth of family photographs, schoolbooks scattered on tables, and the sounds of laughter. The music box sat in a place of honor in the living room, and sometimes at night, Alexander would open it and listen to the melody that had once been his lullaby. His business associates were shocked by the change in him. The ruthless CEO now evaluated every decision by how it would affect the world his young cousins would inherit. Morgan Technologies established a foundation for homeless youth, funding programs that addressed the gaps in the system that had failed Emma and Ethan. On the twins' 13th birthday, Alexander took them to visit their mother's grave. As they stood together, he placed a small replica of the music box beside the flowers they'd brought. She would be so proud of you both, he said, his arm around each of them. And I think she would be happy to know that her family heirloom brought us together. Do you think it was just coincidence? Ethan asked. That we took it to that specific shop on the exact day you were there? Alexander smiled, remembering his mother's words, "Love is the true inheritance I leave you." I think some connections are too strong to remain broken forever, he replied. The music box found its way home, and so did we. Emma leaned against his side. Mom used to say that the most valuable things can't be bought or sold. She was right, Alexander said softly. The music box was never about its monetary value. It was a vessel for something much more precious, the love that connects us across time, even when we think we've lost our way. As they walked back to the car together, Alexander reflected on how a single moment had changed everything, the moment a homeless girl had placed a music box in his hands, unknowingly returning to him not just a family heirloom, but his capacity to love and be loved in return. The true treasure had never been the antique music box, nor the billions in Alexander's bank accounts. It was the melody of connection, of belonging, that now played in their lives, a harmony that money couldn't buy and poverty couldn't diminish. Through chance or fate or perhaps something more mysterious, three lost souls had found their way home to each other, proving that sometimes, what we lose is never truly gone, but waiting to be rediscovered when we need it most. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Remember that wealth comes in many forms, and the richest among us are those who understand that love is the greatest inheritance of all.